no one doubts that to some extent the Gospels are fallible documents containing theological propaganda. Few would deny they also contain strong mythological elements. But there's little agreement on which of the sayings and deeds of Jesus are authentic. If the Jesus of history is that elusive, can we be certain that he even existed? By definition, no Christian scholar has any doubts on that score, nor do most historians. Only one man in academic circles is prepared to argue the opposite case. George Wells is professor of German at London University. Already aware of Christian doubts about the Gospels, he went on to see what could be discovered from the earliest of all Christian documents, the letters of Paul, written some 20 years before the Gospels themselves.
To say I was surprised by what I found would not be quite correct, for I had long felt uneasy about Christian claims about Jesus, but I didn't quite expect to find what I did. As I searched through Paul's letters, I discovered he makes no mention of Jesus' parents, his place of birth, where he lived, or even when he lived. I searched further, and there was no mention of his trial before Pilate, nor of Jerusalem as his place of execution. Not a word either of John the Baptist, or Judas Iscariot, or Peter's denial of his master.
Professor Wells also noted that Paul's letters make no reference whatsoever to Jesus' miracles or parables, and give practically no indication of his ethical teachings.
And if you put all this evidence, or rather lack of evidence, together, I think one has seriously to consider whether Jesus existed as a historical figure in first century Palestine. The name Jesus would have been a particularly good one to give to somebody who was thought to have existed as a saviour figure, because it means literally, God saves.
Professor Wells' argument is that Paul could easily have borrowed his idea about Jesus from the Old Testament and the Jewish literature of the time, which contained passages which could be interpreted as references to a heavenly Redeemer who would descend from heaven, die on earth, and then rise up again to heaven.
I'm not saying that Paul believed Jesus was a myth. He clearly believed that he had lived on earth, but he didn't know where or when. And as for details of Jesus' life, actions, teachings, well, Christian New Testament scholars have been showing for the last 100 years that most of them were myths. Some of them culled straight from the Old Testament and rabbinic sayings, others invented by the early church for specific preaching purposes. In short, I believe very simply that there's nothing in the evidence which commits us to accepting a historical Jesus.
Professor Wells' views are shared by almost no other scholar, but the fact that such a case can seriously be made demonstrates the lack of conclusive evidence about Jesus.